Your brand may be staying on top of current trends, but are you agile enough to stay relevant, resilient, and successful as customers, competition, and the world continues to change at a breakneck pace? I'm thrilled to share the newly revised version of my first book, The Agile Brand. I'm calling it The Agile Brand Revisited. It's been updated to reflect our continually changing world, and it provides 7 principles that form the backbone of an agile brand, offering detailed insights and actionable steps for incorporating them into your business strategy. This is the book that started it all, and I'm excited to share it with you. It's now available in print and digital formats and available everywhere. Learn more by going to the Agile Brand Guide website at www.agilebrandguide.com. Welcome to Season 5 of The Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom, where we talk with enterprise and technology platform leaders about the people, processes, and platforms that make marketing and customer experience successful, scalable, and sustainable. This is what creates an agile brand. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom, advisor and consultant for Fortune 1000 marketing and CX leaders and teams as principal and chief strategist at GK5A, and best-selling author, keynote speaker, entrepreneur, and agile certified coach. The Agile Brand podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To sign up for the Agile Brand newsletter and get the latest insights and articles on marketing technology and CX, or to purchase a copy of my latest book, House of the Customer, go to gregkihlstrom.com. You can also find all my books on Amazon and other retailers. And now on to the show. Today we're going to talk about building the kind of corporate culture that benefits employees, customers, and the business itself. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Steve Robinson, author, speaker, and consultant at S. Robinson Consulting, and the former EVP and Chief Marketing Officer at Chick-fil-A. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Greg. Honored to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to talking about this with you. So why don't we start with you giving a little background on yourself and what you're currently doing?
Well, I grew up in the South, Lower Alabama, LA, went to Auburn University, majored in marketing, met my wife there on a blind date, and we've just celebrated 50 years of marriage.
Oh, wow. Congrats.
Still my best friend. We have 2 grown children and 4 grandchildren. They're all in the Atlanta area. I went to graduate school at Northwestern, Medill School of Journalism and Advertising. I majored in advertising because I really wanted to focus on the brand and the communication aspect of marketing, and turned out to be a great choice, great experience. Too cold, but I enjoyed the program. My first job was with Texas Instruments, and this was in the very beginning of their customer division, semiconductor division focused on calculators. Brand new idea back then. This was 1973. I was there about a year and got a phone call one day from the director of marketing at Six Flags Over Texas, who was brother to one of my Northwestern classmates. And he had an opening at Six Flags Over Texas, and I had a lot of respect for them as a branding focused organization. It's not that I didn't like TI, but they were very engineering oriented, and it was marketing was kind of an uphill climb there. So after interviewing with Dan House, who was director of marketing at the Texas part, I went to work for Six Flags, and I'll summarize by saying I had an amazing 7-year experience with them where I got some great learning and tutoring and not just marketing, but marketing in the context of how do you build a brand? How do you create a unique position in the marketplace?
Yeah.
Sustainable value, et cetera. And my last, of those 7 years, my last almost 4 years, I was director of marketing for Six Flags Over Georgia. They sent me there, and Diane and I have lived in Atlanta for almost 47 years. Had a great run there. I was in my 4th year, and the phone rings, and it was a gentleman I had already met, Jimmy Collins. He was the COO of Chick-fil-A. He called to say, look, we really don't have the marketing resources to help our restaurant operators build their sales. Now, Greg, I already knew that because about a year and a half earlier, we had been in serious conversation with him and others on his team about building a Chick-fil-A restaurant inside Six Flags Over Georgia. All their stores were basically in 7 southeastern states, and that was the primary footprint of the park. They chose not to do it. I won't get into the details of that, but I think it would have helped them a lot.
Yeah.
So he called me and said, we don't have a marketing department, and we're looking for someone to start one. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, I already knew that, or you would have done that deal with me a year and a half.
Right. Right.
But because of that experience a year and a half earlier, I had learned a lot about the company. TI and Six Flags were both publicly owned. Six Flags was privately owned, still owned by the founder and his family. At the time, Jimmy called me. They had roughly 100 restaurants, sales of about 80 million. They're all in malls. Chick-fil-A's finding the sites. It's totally controlled by the home office. They're finding the sites. They're building the restaurants. But then they're contracting with an independent contractor, a very unique franchise arrangement. They're legally franchisees, but they're not equity franchisees.
Okay.
Chick-fil-A takes all the financial risk, but they share the bottom line of the restaurant with this independent contractor. And that model fascinated me. So in answer to Jimmy's call that evening in August, I figured, what's 3 or 4 days at the very least, let me interview with these guys. I might learn something. And I'll jump ahead and just say I was still interviewing in December.
Wow.
I'm sitting in the founder's office, Truett Cathy, Cathy, and I'm doing it stealth because I still love what I'm doing at Six Flags.
Yeah.
And I looked at Truett. I said, Truett, we've been talking almost 5 months. This is starting to get a little cumbersome.
Right.
What are you looking for in the ideal marketing candidate? And am I the guy? And there was this long pause from him. And so I'm beginning to think, well, maybe I'm being a little too aggressive here. And he pauses and he says, I have absolutely no idea what that looks like. I just know whatever it is, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Jimmy and others tell me we need this. And I'm trusting them to find the right person who's capable of doing this. But then he said, but you need to understand that if we invite you to join us, it's because we, and that includes me, we know we'll be able to trust you and have fun together.
Yeah.
Because my intention is if you come here, you will never go anywhere else. Now, Greg, I'd been with 2 companies and in 4 different jobs in an 8-year period.
Yeah.
So you might imagine when he said that, I'm thinking, I'm never going to go anywhere else. Really?
Right.
But then he said, you need to understand that the most important decisions we make here are who we invite to join the organization. Because this was the kicker for me. We don't train culture here. We hire it. And on his desk, he had a plaque with a Bible verse on it, Proverbs 22:1. A good name is to be more valued than riches. Some translations say silver or gold. And I said, well, Truett, I don't know that this will be the last job I ever have, but I love what you're doing here. I love the fact that it's private. Clearly, you have an entrepreneurial spirit, and I grew up in an entrepreneur's home in Alabama.
Yeah.
I think I can help. And as we're starting to leave the conversation, I said, that Bible verse, by the way, could be a definition for a great brand. And I said, I would hope if you invited me to join you, what will go on together is how do we make Chick-fil-A a great brand that people will love. And I was 30 years old. I guess I was very naive to even say that. But what's remarkable is that is the experience I had. And I worked there almost 35 years plus 3 more years on their board. So when I joined them in January, obviously they invited me. When I joined them in January of 81, that year they had sales of about 140 million. No, about 140 stores, sales of about 100 million. And my last year, which was 2015, we had sales of just shy of 7 billion with over 2,100 locations. And my dream, my aspirations of being associated with helping to build a great brand, quite frankly, exceeded my wildest imagination. It was an incredible experience. And quite frankly, it was in many respects a God thing, the way I saw God work in his life, my life, and through the business. And it's still an amazing culture. It is the foundation of that business. The opening subhead of my book states, great brands only grow in great culture and only when leadership cultivates the soil of that culture. I wrote that based upon what I saw at Chick-fil-A. And of course, I studied other great brands, and you could say the same thing about, Nike or BMW or other major iconic brands that people love. But Truett's focus, going back to what he said, I don't know what it is. I just don't want to do it. His focus wasn't on marketing. He never interfered with me doing my job. I mean, never.
Wow. That's uncommon.
Yeah, unbelievable. He focused on people. He focused on keeping the main thing, the mission of the business very clear, and helping people that were attracted to business to personally thrive, because he really did not want anybody to leave. So that's a long answer to kind of where I came from. I should also mention I have 2 unbelievable grown adult children and 4 grandchildren.
Well, great.
So I'm very blessed.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And that's, hearing your story of joining Chick-fil-A, and it really ties directly into what I wanted to talk about today. And, I think for those less familiar with that brand, I think there's a few brands that are kind of talked about when people talk about good customer experience or good employee experience or culture and stuff like that. And, Chick-fil-A is certainly one of them. And so, I was looking forward to having this conversation today just to learn a little bit more about how this is done. And like I said, I think you touched on some of those points already, but, want to dive deeper in a few aspects of that. And let's start with the leadership, because, you talked a little bit about this, but, when we're talking about corporate culture and good company culture, how do you define that? Again, you described a bit of it when you were talking about, your reasons for joining and your reasons for staying, but how do you define good corporate culture?
Well, I have some clarity around that question after 35 plus years there. I feel like there's 3 major, or maybe 4 major ingredients to a great corporate culture. One is there's clarity of mission or purpose. Leadership has clearly defined why we exist. And I'm going to unpack these a little bit for you, but let me give you the 4 first. First, there's clarity around why we exist. 2, there's clarity around core values, and I like to call them non-negotiables, that shape how people make decisions. These are things that you're willing to fall on a sword over, of what you will or will not do when you're operating this business. 3, clarity about what this brand is going to stand for. I call it brand essence. What is the customer promise, not only functionally, but even emotionally and relationally, that you are totally dedicated to delivering? And 4, stability of leadership. You cannot do the first 3 if you have incessant turnover at the top.
Right.
So let me go back to why you exist. This got hammered home to me, fortunately, in my second year, 1982. major financial crisis. Some listeners may have gone through it. We're going through just a little of it now, but in 82, it was severe. Double digit, 18, 19% interest rates. The mall industry came to a screeching halt. Retail sales fell over 30%. Suddenly, we have a serious cash flow problem. Truett assigned his own assets to help underwrite the first corporate office building. And he just comes to his young executive committee, of whom I'm one of the last additions, and says, look, we got a serious cash flow problem. I need to know what you guys are going to do about it. I could unpack that conversation. It was both challenging and humorous, but we chose to go offsite and work on that question for 3 days. And I will tell you, Greg, within a day, we did the kind of stuff most companies would do. We froze budgets. In fact, we cut budgets. We froze hiring. We froze the stores we thought we would open. We cut that number by more than half. And before the first day was over, we had pretty well figured out what we thought we could do to keep cash flow above water. And Truett's oldest son, Dan, made a great observation. He says, we got almost half of the operators and staff members who've been with us last 2 years. I'm not sure they know how we're looking at this stuff beyond just the numbers. What he meant by that is, what does this business really mean to Dad, the founder? Why should we even care if we grow? And that led to a 2-day discussion where we listened to Truett a lot and we wrote the corporate purpose for Chick-fil-A. There was clarity around what was important to Truett, but it had never been put on paper. And what we came out of there with was a statement of why Chick-fil-A exists: to glorify God by being a faithful steward of all that is entrusted to us and have a positive influence on all who come in contact with Chick-fil-A. It was very clear listening to Truett that he considered Chick-fil-A to be a gift from God. He had a vibrant relationship with Christ and the book, the Bible. And he wanted his life to glorify God. Therefore, he wanted the business to glorify God. Secondly, he wanted to help other people thrive, positive influence, whether they were in the business or just a customer. But I think partly because it came out of World War II and the Great Depression, the middle point, by being a great steward, was hugely important to him. He wanted to be very fruitful and efficient with not only money, but the talent that was attracted to the business. And so that purpose statement still exists. It's on a bronze plaque in the front of the headquarters. Not one word has changed. And I would tell you, Greg, that over the years, that purpose statement became a tremendous, not only rallying cry and cultural cornerstone, but it became a really valuable tool in making decisions, particularly with the executive committee. We're sitting there thinking about major initiatives or investments. Well, does this have the potential to fulfill the corporate purpose or not? And is it a better option than maybe something else? We don't have infinite talent. We don't have infinite money. And it proved to be incredibly valuable. Okay, let me go to the second one, which is values. A lot of people write corporate values, and very often they're nothing but words. In our case, I won't bore you with them, but they were 6 fundamental values. Stewardship was one of them. Fun was one of them. But they were values that also help make decisions. And what I learned as the years went along, between the why we exist and the values, they helped shape eventually how we thought about what we wanted the brand to stand for. And through the years, we did a ton of research with customers, non-customers, fast food customers, to try to shape what is it that we can do with Chick-fil-A that will not only make Chick-fil-A unique in the marketplace, but in the process fulfill these values and our why we exist purpose. And when I left, the brand essence that had been well researched, we knew we could deliver it, people valued it, was where good meets gracious. 4 words. We wanted every touch point with Chick-fil-A, no matter whether it was in a restaurant, in a drive-through, in the community, however, at an event, We wanted to connect with people. We wanted everything about the experience to be good, but we also wanted it to have an air of graciousness, hospitality, dignity, and respect. So what that led to, Greg, was a real focus on in strategic planning on, okay, what are we going to do with the food, hospitality, digital stuff, advertising, store design, drive-throughs, everything to maintain the integrity of good, to meet, literally connect with people, and to deliver hospitality that is almost an oxymoron in the fast food industry. And that's the evolution of the brand, which gets to the final point. I don't think we would have ever made that journey if we had a bunch of leadership turnover at the top. Not only did Truett and his family stick around, and they're now in the second and third generation of leaders in the Cathy family, but of the executive committee of which I was a part, most of those men and women served 25 to 35 years. We had a corral of great leaders behind us ready to step in and take over. And so you have all this institutional knowledge, not only strategic, but cultural. When people stay, and Truett and Jimmy design these compensation systems in lieu of stock that really incentivize people to financially want to stay. And so what happens when people actually pour a full career, a lifetime into a business like this, you don't lose as much momentum around strategic focus, cultural focus, and decision making can be pushed down, and you can have trust in the ability of people to make wise choices. That kind of cultural environment is what has enabled Chick-fil-A over time, didn't happen quickly, over time, to evolve from a business that was just trying to sell chicken sandwiches to a brand today that I like to say many people can't live without.
Before we continue, let's take a quick break. If you're like many marketing leaders today, you're inundated with a need to improve the customer experience across an increasing number of channels and touch points, all while ensuring your team is performing well, innovating, and continuously improving. So how do you find the time to determine what's next for you, your team, your brand, and your customers? My company, GK5A, can help. Whether it is advisory services, evaluation of marketing technology platforms and solutions, or digital agencies and implementation partners, or assistance with creating strategic roadmaps and prioritization of efforts, we've done it all and served as an ally to Fortune 1000 brands in industries like financial services, healthcare, consumer electronics, professional services, and more. You can learn more about these services and contact us at www.gk5a. That's www.gk5a.com. Now let's get back to the show. And so definitely uncommon that there would be so many people in leadership that would stay so long. I think the potential downside, not necessarily downside, the potential downside is, lots happened in 25, 30 years, right? Lots of things quickly changing.
Right.
How did you, obviously there was a level of trust there to maybe take risks or do new things, but how did you keep things fresh, or how did you adapt quickly to, again, lots of stuff happened in that time period alone. So how did you do that with the leadership team?
Great question. You remember what I told you, said that Truett said to me in my last interview, if we hire you, if we invite you to come here, it's because we know we can trust you and have fun together.
Yeah.
So the first part of answering your question is to, at every level in the organization, when people are looking at hiring talent in their group or major leadership roles, approach it with the same diligence and the same discipline that they did in 1981 when they hired me.
Yeah.
Hire talent that is not only competent in what you're asking them to do, but hire people who have the character qualities and the interrelational skills that with time they could potentially contribute in a myriad of aspects or a myriad of roles in the business, which leads to two other points. What I discovered very quickly, because I made some mistakes fairly early at Chick-fil-A, and I unpacked at least one of the big ones in my book, Covert Cows and Chick-fil-A. One of the things I discovered was you could make mistakes, and if they trusted you, they would look as a mistake as long as it wasn't just a complete financial threat, as an opportunity to learn and get smarter. And as Jimmy Collins told me after I made a fairly big mistake, he said, "You'll never make that mistake again." So we've just invested $2 million in your education. Well, what grew out of that mistake impacted the strategic direction of marketing and brand strategy for Chick-fil-A forever. The financial aspect of the mistake was not nearly as consequential as what I learned from it. Okay, so if you have an environment where people have the freedom to make mistakes, what happens? They also have the freedom to think outside the box and be very innovative. And Chick-fil-A has evolved to be an incredibly innovative environment because people have room to think outside the box, exercise their giftedness, to look and benchmark businesses, great brands and great businesses outside the fast food business. And then I would say the second key part is creating an environment where customers king. We're going to listen to customers about every significant innovation we're even thinking about. We're going to listen to them in small groups. We're going to listen to them through the internet. We're going to listen to them by talking to them in restaurants. We're going to use phone surveys. We're going to use mystery shoppers. And this flow, which is still there today, this flow of customer insights, including the qualitative experience they're having at Chick-fil-A, drives innovation. Goes back to the previous point I make. It drives people's creative thinking and create an environment where people can, experiment with 20 or 30 ideas in order to land one big one. So my last point, the other key thing we learned was you attract great talent, you give them unique experiences, and then you move them around. So when I left Chick-fil-A, there were roughly 250 people in the marketing department. Today, over half of those people are working in some other department. They're still at the home office, but they're doing something else. They're in design, they're in real estate, they're in international, they're in the customer voice systems, they're in the digital interface space with customers. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But what happens is two things. One, they have taken a marketing brand perspective into their new roles. And two, they're given constant opportunities to grow and experience without having to leave Chick-fil-A. And people learn pretty quickly that if they're a high performance leader, they're going to have opportunities to do a major role for 6 or 7 or 8 years. And somebody's got to come along and tap them on the shoulder. And how'd you like to go over and give leadership to this initiative?
Yeah. Wow.
The chairs are always moving. Yeah. And I think that helps keep great talent.
Yeah, because there's opportunity. I mean, I think a lot of people may just get tired of doing the same thing for, after 3-4 years or something, but still love the culture and that's great that they can still find themselves in the company and in the culture, but be able to change that up. That's really interesting.
When I see a former staff member that I've worked with, happens all the time, I have to ask them, "What are you doing now?"
Yeah.
Very few of them are doing what they were doing when I left.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Nice. Well, I wish we had even more time to talk here. I've got one last thing I want to ask you, and before we wrap up here, there's so much focus on customer experience these days, and certainly it's one of the key points of competition, of differentiation. Chick-fil-A has been doing this for a little while. What are your thoughts on this? Is more competition better here? Have brands like Chick-fil-A and maybe a handful of others, are they, do they already kind of have the tools to do this? From your standpoint, what does the future of customer experience look like?
Well, I've got two or three comments. First of all, Chick-fil-A was uniquely positioned to raise the bar around hospitality, and we made a conscious decision around 2002. We're going to add a consistent hospitality experience to the Chick-fil-A experience. We benchmark major companies that have great hospitality and service. We benchmark them in the retail space as well as visiting their home offices. We brought in consultants, primarily Horst Schulze, who was one of the founders of Ritz-Carlton in the United States. He helped us think through, okay, how do we get outside the paradigm of fast food and treat people with honor, dignity, and respect, which is a completely unexpected in the fast food space. But the key ability of Chick-fil-A to do this was because of the Chick-fil-A franchisee, or we call operator model, where you have an independent contractor fully engaged in the business. Half the pre-tax net operating profits is their income. They have a vested interest in growing the business, growing the guest experience, attracting and keeping great talent. And because of their leadership on the ground in every restaurant, we felt like we could mobilize a hospitality model, coach and teach them on how to attract people that have a hospitality bent, how to measure it, and then spend time with customers figuring out, okay, what are those hospitality behaviors that they will in fact value, notice, but not interfere with their eating experience. And there's a lot about this in my book, but it transformed the brand. It moved us into what I call a blue ocean brand. And there's a book out there, Blue Ocean Strategy, that talks about how do you get your business in a position where there's a lot of competitors, but none of them are in your space. And that's what evolved, but principally by adding a very personally engaging focus with every customer, whether they're in the restaurant, in the drive-thru, or at community events, wherever they are. How do we engage with people personally and show honor and respect to them? And say my pleasure as just one of the behaviors that mirrors that. And the brand took off. Not only the perceived value of the brand, but sales, same store sales absolutely took off. So my headline on that answer is, it's very hard to do if you don't have great leadership at the point of attack, at the retail level. We did. They still do. But it also means you gotta create a culture where we're gonna, even though it's gonna be hard. I mean, it's harder than making a sandwich.
Right.
Even though it's gonna be hard, we're gonna go out of our way to treat people with respect and honor, look them in the eye, say my pleasure, what can I do for you, carry large orders to the car, to the table, refresh their drinks, on and on and on. And after several years of testing, operators were very skeptical. But at the end of a 7-year development testing period, we saw the brand get stronger and sales actually be higher than our previous form of operation. So everything about operational excellence didn't change, but the add-on was hospitality. And then the third add-on, which I can't unpack much now, was when we came out with the Eat More Chicken campaign featuring the cows, and we made the brand a topic of discussion in the market. We weren't just showing food or price or where to turn. We were entertaining people, and it changed. The combination of those three big things created incredible momentum for Chick-fil-A.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, Steve, thank you so much for joining the show. Two quick things before we wrap up here. You'd mentioned your book a couple times here. I'd love for you to give an opportunity to how does someone get a copy of your book?
Sure.
And then one last thing, just one piece of advice. People listening to this, a lot of people at large and enterprise brands listening here that want to make meaningful improvements to customer experience. What's one piece of advice you'd have for them as they're navigating the months ahead?
Well, let me start with that one. I would say study, as we did, study brands that have a consistent track record of great guest interactions. And when we studied companies like Ritz-Carlton, BMW retail service centers, Nordstrom's, Southwest Airlines when they were in their heyday, Nike retail, Apple retail. And we just tried to understand, what are these people doing, not only in terms of how they treat customers and interact with customers, for example, Apple with the Genius Bar, but more importantly, how do they do it consistently, location to location? So I would start there. If you're really committed to a hospitality, higher level of service, study companies are already doing it.
Yeah.
I wrote the book wrote the book in 2019 after I'd been gone a couple of years, because it struck me with Chick-fil-A's growth. They did not in one spot have what I call the biography of the business and a biography of the brand. And I got permission from Truett's son, Dan Cathy, who by this time was the CEO, and told him, look, if you give me the IP rights, I'd like to write a book for all the Chick-fil-A family on where did this brand come from. And as I started writing it and let other people read drafts, I got a lot of feedback. You got something here that can be beneficial to people beyond Chick-fil-A. So that's the evolution, how the book came about. It's heavily my voice. It's written through my experience, which means in a sense it's third party. I allowed Dan and other members of his family read the book, but I must tell you, they had virtually zero edits to it. They gave me great freedom with the book. It's called Covert Cows, in honor of our campaign. Covert Cows and Chick-fil-A, how faith, cows, and chicken built an iconic brand. And it's on Amazon. Barnes & Nobles did have it. I don't know if they still have it. I think in many places you can still find it. If not in a Walmart store, you can find it on their digital store. And for large quantities, it's carried by Bulk Books. So it's out there.
Wonderful. Great. Well, again, I'd like to thank Steve Robinson, author, speaker, and consultant at S. Robinson Consulting, and the former EVP and Chief Marketing Officer at Chick-fil-A, for joining the show. You can learn more about Steve by following the links in the show notes. Thanks again for listening to the Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes of the show at www.gregkihlstrom.com. That's GREGKIHLSTROM.com. To get a copy of my latest book, House of the Customer, visit my website, or you can find it on Amazon or other retailers. The Agile Brand is produced by Missing Link, a Latina-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, they craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content. Until next time, stay agile.